Hello, YouTubers, friends, compatriots, bootlickers, shills, deathly serfs, peasants, vassals, minions, meat sacks. I'm usually welcome. And so let's take a closer look at just exactly what's going to happen with these tariffs. And of course, the headlines these days are about all of Trump's gyrations back and forth on tariffs. Now he's put a hold on auto tariffs from Mexico and Canada, and he's put a stay on some of the other tariffs with Mexico and Canada as well. And I'm not really sure why he's doing this. It's just confusing the market. The stock markets are tanking, and there's a lot of fear and uncertainty. And on the surface, it looks like chaos. But once again, what is it exactly that Trump is trying to bargain for? And that's not really understood either. But the whole idea of tariffs and what kind of effects they're going to have, some of them are the fear is justified, and some of them it's a little strange. And it sounds like in a lot of ways there might be some discomfort, but it's not going to be crazy. Because one of the things that struck me that of course Biden's inflation was touted to be 10, 15, 20%, and in reality on a lot of items it was 30 or 40 or 50%. And the inflation we're seeing now under Trump is around 3%. So it seems to be an overreaction. But I understand it because any more inflation right now, considering the inflation burden that Americans are facing, is daunting. But in the scheme of things, it's a fairly small amount. And there's a lot of predictions by certain economists that we're going to see a worst economic performance in a long time in the U.S. moving forward, and that it's going to hasten recession, and that there's going to be a lot of dramatic price increases. But I'm going to try and be a little more realistic about this because when you look at the numbers, it's not good news, but it's not quite as dramatic as some people think. So some of the examples are we're seeing a 1% increase in prices in a lot of things. And so once again, that inflation level is low, but we're in certain things it's going to be higher. Italian wines, for example, have gone up 41%, and steel and lumber costs, steel has gone up 30%, and lumber's gone up 20%. And there's going to be a big, huge loss in consumer spending due to this, which will just cause a cycle. Because with less consumer buying, of course, it's going to have an economic impact. But the auto industry is going to be particularly hard hit because we get a lot of parts from Canada and Mexico, and we also get a lot of cars from Mexico. So the fact is that a lot of buyers will just move to American cars and cars that are made in America. Although it's hard to sort it out, of course, because a lot of cars are sold in America and their build is American products. So, but U.S. farmers are going to pay 15% more to export their goods, and that's going to include chicken, wheat, corn, cotton, soy, pork, beef, seafood, fruit, vegetables, and dairy. So we'll see a lot of price adjustments moving forward, and so that's some of the areas that people are going to be nervous about. And then, of course, we get 65% of our vegetables from Mexico, including a lot of seasonal vegetables and fruit, strawberries, avocados, bananas, tomatoes, cucumbers, squash, raspberries, pineapple, nuts. And then on top of that, of course, a lot of Canadian and Mexican beers, which are really popular in the U.S. Modelo overtook Bud Light as the biggest selling beer in the United States over the last several years after their woke commercials and the like. So these tariffs are definitely going to target things that people have gotten used to buying. But there is some truth in the fact that Americans will just adjust their buying habits according to prices. And so if a lot of seasonal vegetables and fruits from Mexico skyrocket, then there'll be a bigger market for U.S. grown products. Although it's going to be harder to get things out of season. And according to figures, with the tariffs, 400,000 U.S. jobs could be lost and 500,000 jobs could be lost in Canada. And that's probably true. there's going to be an economic impact, and so this idea that jobs are going to increase for Americans is certainly misleading. And also there's a chain reaction. Of course, with the tariffs, there'll be a chain reaction through the whole supply chain, and that's where we're going to end up getting some surprises moving forward, because we just don't know ultimately how the tariffs will affect certainly the things that we like to buy. And one of the other, I looked up some interesting figures too that kind of play into what's going on here and the whole idea, particularly of produce going up. That's the fact that since 1900, we've lost 75% of crop varieties, and the U.S. has lost 93% of vegetable varieties from 1900 to 1983. So that's one of the things that's interesting too, the consolidation of the industrial agriculture complex, and the fact that a lot of smaller farmers have been squeezed out, and we have these huge agricultural conglomerates. And so that's going to exacerbate the problem, of course, moving forward, because if we had a lot more small players in the market, then these kind of tariffs wouldn't be such a huge effect. But the fact that we have these agricultural conglomerates, and a lot of them are transnational, then definitely inflationary forces will manifest because of just these large operations and near monopolies in a lot of cases. But another interesting thing about this is the U.S. agricultural exports, have dramatically increased. In 1998, we only exported $52 billion worth of produce, but in 2023, it nearly tripled to $147 billion. So that's an interesting component of this as well, and why these tariffs are going to affect the United States, because the fact is we're getting a lot more of our food from overseas than even 20 years ago, a really huge amount of difference. So it's really pretty amazing that we have so much agriculture in the United States, and yet we find ourselves relying on foreign suppliers more and more and more. So that's kind of crazy. And then our farm trade deficit is $49 billion, and it's going up. And so this whole idea that our trade balances are going to be corrected with these tariffs doesn't seem to be true, at least as according to the figures so far now. And the U.S. now imports more food than it exports. Really incredible. I mean, the United States used to be a complete agriculture powerhouse, and it's just amazing that we have to import so much food here now. But a lot of it, of course, is American taste. We like to have we like to have a continuous flow of vegetables and fruits, for example, all year round. And if we had to rely on just American suppliers, there would be unavailability for certain seasons. But the fact is, importing it, we can get a lot of vegetables and fruits out of season. So for me, that's kind of fascinating in the sense that Americans have just really gotten used to getting what they want all the time, and that may change, particularly as the switch over to American growers and less reliance on imports into the United States, and Americans just adjust to the fact that they're not going to get all those fruit and vegetables they want all year round. And another point of this too is that between 2006 and 2018, we had $40 billion in exports, and now it's flipped, and we have $50 billion in imports. So that's just more statistics that prove the fact that what's going on here. The U.S. is an incredible agricultural powerhouse, and yet we've switched from being generally exporters to completely be importers. So that's where the tariffs are going to be pretty dangerous for Americans and the pricing that we see. And so who knows, maybe this will play out and Americans will start buying more local produce and American grown produce and just have to change their habits, but we'll see. And then, of course, factoring into all this, to me, is the big picture, and that's the fact that before 1900, nearly 90% of Americans were self-employed, and nearly all of them were self-employed in agriculture. So this used to be a country of a huge amount of small farmers and local produce, and most of our communities got a lot of local produce. But now, in the era of globalization and these giant agricultural conglomerates, we move to this system now that's very vulnerable, and it's particularly vulnerable when it comes to tariffs. So that's what we're finding now. So to go back to the original point, this whole clusterfuck that's going on now with Trump and his gyrations, and one day the tariffs are guaranteed, the next minute they're put off. As I said before, I don't really see the point of putting off these tariffs. Maybe bargaining to get more concessions, but and as I talked about earlier too, this chain reaction. Of course, what we're seeing is that we're going to get a double whammy on tariffs because not only are we waging all these tariffs on Canada and Mexico, and including the EU and China, but particularly with Canada and Mexico, we're getting a lot of retaliatory tariffs, and that's going to affect availability, and that's going to affect prices. So we have the tariffs in the United States, and their implied raising of prices, and then definitely we're going to have prices raised on anything coming in from Mexico and Canada because of the tariffs. So it'll pile up, and I'm not sure how long it'll take for the inflation on these products to appear. We're probably going to see some results pretty soon, but theoretically, it will unfold a little slowly, and then perhaps at some point it'll flatten out because the tariffs have sort of a baked-in price rise that goes with them, and that price rise will happen, and then it'll just flatten out. And kind of like with gas, when it goes from $3 to $5, people get used to paying $5, and they accept it as just an inevitability. And we could see that same consumer trend moving forward, that we get used to paying 50 cents more for certain produce and vegetables, a dollar more for others, and then if price rises are exponentially getting higher, then consumers will just move away from them. So anyway, I'm still shaking my head at Trump's gyrations, and it's going to change from day to day, and I'm going to keep my eyes on it, and I'm sure everyone else will too. I'm East Validity, don't you be one too.